Jake's response came within minutes. Wonderful news. Can you start Monday? I'll arrange for the house to be cleaned and stocked with basic supplies. Looking forward to having you join our team. Monday, 3 days away. Maria stared at the text message, her heart racing. 3 days to pack up their entire life, notify the children's schools, and move 40 miles to begin a completely new chapter. She looked around their small apartment, seeing it with fresh eyes. Suddenly, the cramped rooms and thin walls seemed like obstacles she had already overcome rather than permanent limitations. In 3 days, Emma and Carlos would have their own bedrooms in a real house. In 3 days, she would be cooking for ranch hands instead of serving coffee to truckers. Sunday night arrived faster than seemed possible. Maria had worked like a woman possessed for 3 days, packing belongings, arranging for mail forwarding, withdrawing Emma and Carlos from Millbrook Elementary. Mrs. Peterson had cried when they said goodbye, making Maria promise to bring the children for visits. "You're doing the right thing," the elderly woman had said, hugging Emma and Carlos tightly. "Sometimes we have to take a leap of faith to find where we really belong." The moving truck, actually Jake's ranch pickup with a large trailer attached, sat in the parking lot loaded with their possessions. It was surprising how little they actually owned when everything was packed into boxes. Clothes, books, a few pieces of furniture, kitchen items, and toys for the children. Their entire life in Millbrook fit easily into the trailer. Emma and Carlos were sleeping fitfully on air mattresses in the empty apartment. Maria had told them they could stay up late since it was their last night in Millbrook, but excitement had eventually given way to exhaustion. They would wake up tomorrow in a new house, in a new town, beginning a new life. Maria couldn't sleep. She walked through the empty rooms one more time, checking that they hadn't forgotten anything important. The apartment felt different without their belongings, smaller somehow, and definitely shabbier. She tried to remember what it had felt like 3 years ago when they had first moved in, when it had seemed like a fresh start after her husband left. Now she was making another fresh start, but this one felt different. It felt like moving towards something instead of running away from something. At 5:30 Monday morning, Maria woke the children and helped them dress in the clothes they had set aside for traveling. Emma was excited but clingy, holding tight to Maria's hand as they walked to the car for the last time. Carlos was quieter, looking back at the apartment building as they drove away. The drive to Broken Arrow Ranch passed quickly. Emma chattered about seeing Buttercup the horse again and wondered if there would be kittens in the barn. Carlos studied the landscape, pointing out differences from Millbrook. The trees were taller here, the hills more pronounced, the sky somehow bigger. Jake was waiting for them at the main house, along with 2 ranch hands Maria had met briefly during their visit. They helped unload the trailer with surprising efficiency, carrying boxes and furniture to the employee house with practiced teamwork. "Welcome home," Jake said as Maria unlocked the door to their new house. Home. The word sounded strange, but right. The house smelled like cleaning supplies and fresh flowers. Someone had put a bouquet of wildflowers on the kitchen table along with a note that read, "Welcome to Broken Arrow Ranch. Looking forward to your cooking." The crew, Emma and Carlos, ran through the rooms, their voices echoing off the walls as they chose bedrooms and planned where their belongings would go. Maria stood in the living room, watching sunlight stream through windows that faced rolling pastures instead of a parking lot. "Your first meal service is lunch," Jake said, glancing at his watch. "That gives you about 2 hours to get settled in the kitchen. No pressure for anything fancy today, just something filling for 8 people. Maria nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "What time is breakfast usually?" 6 a.m. Lunch at noon. Dinner at 6 p.m. Most of the crew drinks coffee throughout the day, so keeping a pot going is appreciated. After Jake left, Maria sent Emma and Carlos to unpack their clothes while she walked over to the main house kitchen. The space was as impressive as she remembered, but now she was responsible for making it produce meals that would satisfy hungry ranch workers. She opened the walk-in refrigerator and found it well stocked with meat, dairy, and fresh vegetables. The pantry contained flour, rice, beans, canned goods, and spices. Everything she needed to cook substantial, satisfying meals. For lunch, she decided on something simple but filling. Grilled cheese sandwiches made with thick Texas toast and sharp cheddar, tomato soup from scratch using canned tomatoes and fresh herbs, and a large salad with ranch dressing. Comfort food that would be hard to mess up. As she cooked, ranch hands wandered through the kitchen, introducing themselves and offering friendly advice. Tom, the foreman, was a weathered man in his 50s who had worked on the ranch for 15 years. Miguel, barely 20, was learning horse training and spoke to Maria in rapid Spanish when he discovered she was fluent. Sarah, one of only 2 women on the crew, worked with the cattle and promised to teach Emma about ranch animals. Jake told us you'd never cooked for cowboys before, Tom said, snagging a piece of cheese while Maria assembled sandwiches. Don't worry about it. We're not picky eaters. Just make sure there's plenty of it. And strong coffee, added Miguel. Ranch work starts early. At noon precisely, the crew gathered in the dining room. Maria served the sandwiches and soup family style, with pitchers of iced tea and water. The men and women ate with the focused attention of people who had been working hard all morning. The food disappeared quickly, and several people complimented the soup. This is real food, Sarah said, helping herself to a second bowl of soup. The last cook we had thought ranch hands lived on beans and beef jerky. After lunch, Maria returned to her house to check on Emma and Carlos. They had unpacked their clothes and were exploring their new bedrooms. Emma had arranged her stuffed animals on the windowsill where they could look out at the pasture. Carlos had set up his books and was already reading in the window seat. Do you like it here? Maria asked them. It's the best house ever, Emma declared. My room is bigger than our whole kitchen used to be. Carlos looked up from his book. It's quiet. But good quiet, not scary quiet. That evening, Maria prepared her first dinner for the crew. She had found ground beef in the refrigerator and decided on spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread, green salad, and chocolate chip cookies for dessert. The cookies had been Emma's suggestion, and Maria had let her help measure ingredients. The dining room was livelier at dinner, with more conversation and laughter. The ranch hands talked about their day, planned tomorrow's work, and gradually began including Maria in their discussions. They asked about her background, her children, and her impressions of ranch life so far. The spaghetti sauce is incredible, Jake said, helping himself to seconds. What's your secret? My grandmother's recipe, Maria replied. She always said the secret was to let the flavors marry slowly. And a little dark chocolate. Dark chocolate and spaghetti sauce. Miguel looked skeptical. Just a square, melted into the sauce. It adds depth without making it sweet. After dinner, while the crew lingered over coffee and cookies, Maria began planning breakfast for the next day. 6 a.m. seemed impossibly early, but she would need to have coffee ready and hot food available for people who started work before sunrise. Her second day began at 5 a.m. Maria dressed quietly and walked across the gravel road to the main house under a sky full of stars. The kitchen was dark and quiet, but it felt welcoming rather than intimidating. She started coffee first, then began mixing batter for pancakes. By 6 a.m., she had pancakes, bacon, scrambled eggs, and hash browns ready to serve. The crew arrived exactly on time, their hair damp from quick showers, their movements brisk with purpose. Now this is how you start a day, Tom said, loading his plate with food. I could get used to this kind of service. The breakfast disappeared even faster than lunch had the day before. Maria made a mental note to increase portions. These people worked hard and needed substantial fuel to get through their days. After breakfast cleanup, Maria returned home to get Emma and Carlos ready for their first day at Millbrook Regional School. The district served several small communities, and the bus would pick them up at the end of the ranch's main drive. Are you nervous? Maria asked Carlos as they waited for the bus. A little, but everyone here has been nice so far. Emma bounced on her toes, her new backpack securely strapped on. Will the other kids think it's cool that we live on a ranch? I think they'll think you're very lucky, Maria said. The school bus was smaller than the one they had ridden in Millbrook, and the driver, Mrs. Garcia, seemed to know every child by name. She welcomed Emma and Carlos warmly and promised to introduce them to other students their age. With the children off to school, Maria returned to the kitchen to begin preparing lunch. She was starting to understand the rhythm of ranch meals. Breakfast needed to be substantial and available early. Lunch should be filling but not so heavy that it would slow down afternoon work. Dinner could be more elaborate, with time for conversation and relaxation. By the end of the first week, Maria had settled into a routine that felt natural. She woke at 5 a.m. and started coffee and breakfast preparation. After the crew headed out for morning work, she cleaned the kitchen and planned the day's remaining meals. She had a few hours of free time while the crew was working, which she used to do laundry, clean their house, or explore the ranch property. Emma and Carlos were adapting beautifully. Emma had already made friends with 2 girls in her class and spent her afternoons helping Sarah with feeding the horses. Carlos was fascinated by the ranch's equipment and had talked Tom into explaining how various machines worked. They seemed really happy, Jake observed on Friday evening as they watched Emma and Carlos playing in the yard outside the main house. They are, Maria agreed. I haven't seen them this relaxed in years. What about you? Any regrets? Maria considered the question seriously. The work was challenging, and she was still learning the preferences of individual crew members. Some liked their eggs over easy, others scrambled. Miguel needed his coffee strong enough to dissolve a spoon. Sarah was trying to eat healthier and appreciated when Maria included extra vegetables. But the challenges felt manageable rather than overwhelming. The crew was patient with her learning curve and generous with praise when meals went well. The kitchen was a joy to work in, with its good equipment and ample space. And the setting was undeniably beautiful, with views of rolling hills and grazing cattle visible from every window. No regrets, she said finally. This feels like where we're supposed to be. Jake smiled. I'm glad. You've made a real difference here already. The crew is happier, and frankly, so am I. It's nice to come in from work and smell something good cooking instead of wondering if I have the energy to make a sandwich. The second week brought Maria's first real test. On Wednesday, Jake announced that they would have extra hands for the rest of the week. A neighboring ranch was lending them 4 cowboys to help with moving cattle to new pastures. 12 people for lunch and dinner, he said apologetically. I know that's more than we discussed, but I can help with meal prep if you need it. Maria felt a familiar flutter of nervousness, but pushed it aside. 12 people was just 8 people with 50% more food. The principles remained the same. She planned carefully, choosing meals that could be scaled up easily. Chili with cornbread and salad for lunch. Chicken and dumplings with green beans for dinner. Hearty, filling food that would satisfy cowboys who had been working cattle all day. The visiting cowboys were appreciative and complimentary. One of them, an older man named Buck, told her it was the best chili he had eaten outside of Texas. Ma'am, if you ever get tired of this place, my ranch could sure use a cook like you, he said, helping himself to a third bowl. Maria smiled and thanked him, but she realized the compliment didn't tempt her the way it might have a few weeks earlier. She wasn't looking for the next opportunity anymore. She had found where she belonged. By the end of her third week, Maria had established herself as an essential part of the ranch operation. The crew looked forward to meals, lingering over coffee and conversation. Jake seemed more relaxed, knowing that one major aspect of ranch management was being handled competently. Emma had become the unofficial ranch mascot, charming everyone with her enthusiasm for horses and her willingness to help with small chores. Carlos had found a mentor in Tom, who was teaching him about ranch equipment and cattle management. I think we're really going to make it here, Maria told Jake one evening as they sat on the main house porch, watching Emma and Carlos play with a litter of barn kittens that had appeared the week before. I never doubted it, Jake replied. You all fit here like you'd been here for years. Maria looked out over the pastures where cattle grazed peacefully in the evening light. In the distance, she could see Sarah and Miguel working with horses in the training corral. The scene was peaceful and purposeful, everyone contributing to something larger than themselves. 3 weeks ago, she had been serving coffee to truckers and worrying about paying rent. Now she was cooking for cowboys and living in a house with a view of mountains on the horizon. It seemed impossible that such a dramatic change could happen so quickly, but here they were. Emma ran up to the porch, cradling a tiny orange kitten. Mama, Jake said I could keep this one if it's okay with you. Her name is Pumpkin. Maria looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at Jake, who was trying not to smile. I think Pumpkin would like living in our house, she said. Emma's squeal of delight echoed across the ranch yard, and Maria realized that this was what contentment felt like. Not the absence of challenges, but the presence of purpose, community, and hope for the future. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Maria Santos understood that sometimes the best decisions were the ones that scared you most. Sometimes a single job posting could change everything. Sometimes taking a leap of faith led you exactly where you needed to be. The ranch settled into evening quiet, with the crew heading to their quarters and Jake walking the property for his nightly check of cattle and equipment. Maria gathered Emma and Carlos, along with Pumpkin the kitten, and headed home to their house among the oak trees. Tomorrow would bring another early morning, another breakfast to prepare, another day of feeding hard-working people who had become more like family than employees. It would bring new challenges and small triumphs, moments of satisfaction and ongoing learning. But tonight, as Maria tucked her children into beds in rooms larger than their old apartment's living room, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the deep peace of being exactly where she belonged, doing work that mattered, surrounded by people who appreciated her efforts. The job posting had appeared at noon on an ordinary Tuesday. By accepting it, Maria Santos had transformed not just her circumstances, but her understanding of what was possible. Sometimes the answer to your prayers came disguised as an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. Sometimes it really was exactly as good as it seemed. As she turned off the lights and checked the doors one final time, Maria could hear the gentle sounds of the ranch at rest. Cattle lowing softly in the distance, the wind rustling through oak leaves, Emma and Carlos breathing quietly in their new bedrooms. This was home. This was family. This was the future she had dared to hope for when she clicked send on an email to a stranger named Jake Morrison. The ranch cook position had been filled. The Santos family had found their place in the world. And tomorrow morning, Maria would wake up at 5 a.m. to start another day of doing what she loved in a place where she belonged, surrounded by people who had become her chosen family. In the end, it hadn't been about cooking for cowboys at all. It had been about cooking with love for people who appreciated good food and honest work. It had been about finding a community where her children could grow up safe and confident. It had been about discovering that sometimes the biggest risks led to the greatest rewards. Maria fell asleep to the sound of owls calling across the pastures, already planning tomorrow's menu and looking forward to another day at Broken Arrow Ranch. The email was brief, but not unfriendly. Jake Morrison had written back within hours of receiving her application, which surprised Maria. She had expected to wait days, maybe weeks, for any kind of response. Miss Santos, thank you for your interest in the cook position at Broken Arrow Ranch. Your email was well written and your experience sounds relevant to our needs. I would like to speak with you by phone to discuss the position in more detail. I am available this evening after 7 p.m. or tomorrow morning before 8 a.m. Please let me know what works best for your schedule. Best regards, Jake Morrison. Maria read the message 3 times, her heart beating faster with each reading. He wanted to talk to her. That had to be a good sign, didn't it? Or maybe he just wanted to let her down gently over the phone instead of by email. She glanced around the diner, making sure Mr. Henderson wasn't watching, and quickly typed a response saying she would be available that evening after 7. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The rest of her shift crawled by at an agonizing pace. Every time the lunch rush slowed down, her mind wandered to the phone call. What should she say? What questions would he ask? Should she mention up front that she had never worked on a ranch, or wait to see if he brought it up? Jenny, the other waitress, noticed her distraction during the afternoon lull. You seem different today. Less defeated. Maria smiled as she refilled salt and pepper shakers. I applied for another job. Got a call back already. Really? Where? A ranch about 40 miles north. They need a cook. Jenny raised her eyebrows. A ranch? Like with horses and cows? That's what ranches usually have. But you've never worked on a ranch. I've never done a lot of things until I had to learn how, Maria replied. It was true. 3 years ago, she had never waited tables or operated a commercial coffee machine or dealt with difficult customers. She had learned because she needed to learn. When her shift ended, Maria picked up Emma and Carlos from Mrs. Peterson's house. The elderly woman could tell immediately that something was different. "You look like someone who got good news," Mrs. Peterson observed as the children gathered their backpacks. "Maybe. The ranch owner wants to talk to me on the phone tonight." "That's wonderful. I told you that posting appeared for a reason." Emma tugged on Maria's sleeve. "Mama, are we really going to live with cowboys?" "Slow down, Mija. It's just a phone call." "But, yes, if we got the job, there would probably be cowboys around." Carlos was more practical. "What about school? Would we have to change schools?" "We would have to look into that," Maria admitted. "But lots of kids change schools. It's not the end of the world." At home, Maria made dinner while the children did homework, but her mind was entirely focused on the upcoming phone call. She rehearsed answers to potential questions. "Why do you want to work on a ranch?" "I'm looking for a stable environment where I can use my cooking skills to support a hardworking team." "What experience do you have with large-scale meal preparation?" "While my restaurant experience has been for smaller groups, I'm confident in my ability to scale up recipes and manage kitchen logistics efficiently." After dinner, she helped Emma with a difficult math worksheet while Carlos read quietly on the couch. At exactly 7 o'clock, her phone rang. "Miss Santos. This is Jake Morrison from Broken Arrow Ranch." His voice was deep and calm, with just a hint of a Western drawl. He sounded older than she had expected, maybe in his 40s. "Thank you for calling, Mr. Morrison. I'm very interested in learning more about the position. Please call me Jake. I appreciate you getting back to me so quickly. Can you tell me a little more about your cooking experience?" Maria had prepared for this question. "I've been working at Henderson's Diner here in Millbrook for 3 years. I handle everything from breakfast prep to dinner service, manage inventory, and coordinate with suppliers. Before that, I learned traditional Mexican cooking from my grandmother, so I'm comfortable with both American comfort food and more diverse flavors." "That sounds good. The job here involves preparing 3 meals a day for anywhere from 6 to 12 people, depending on the season and what projects we have going. Breakfast is usually around 6 a.m., lunch at noon, dinner at 6 p.m. Are those hours manageable for you?" "Yes, absolutely." Maria hesitated, then decided to be direct. "I should mention that I have 2 children, ages 8 and 10. Your posting mentioned a family-friendly environment." There was a brief pause, and Maria's stomach clenched. This was where he would politely explain that they needed someone without family obligations. Instead, Jake chuckled. "Miss Santos, half our crew has kids. My own daughter is 12, and she spends summers here with me. Kids are part of ranch life. The housing we provide is a 3-bedroom house about a quarter-mile from the main buildings. It has a yard and plenty of space for children to play safely." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. "That sounds wonderful. Can you tell me about your experience with quantity cooking?" Feeding a ranch crew is different from restaurant work. These folks burn a lot of calories during the day, and they expect substantial, filling meals. This was where her lack of ranch experience would show, but Maria decided to be honest. "I don't have specific ranch cooking experience, but I understand the concept. Working people need food that will sustain them through physical labor. I'm confident I can learn the specific requirements quickly. I'm a hard worker, and I pay attention to details." "I appreciate your honesty," Jake said. "Ranch work has a learning curve for everyone. What matters most is attitude and reliability. Can you handle being somewhat isolated? The nearest town is 15 miles away, and during busy seasons, you might not get off the ranch for days at a time." Maria thought about her current life, rushing between work and childcare and errands, always feeling behind on everything. The idea of a slower pace, even if it meant fewer conveniences, sounded appealing. "I think I would enjoy that, actually. My children, and I could use some peace and quiet." "What about transportation? Do you have a reliable vehicle?" Maria winced slightly. "I have a car, though it's getting older." "Is there vehicle maintenance available on the ranch?" "We have a mechanic on staff, and there's a garage. Basic maintenance and repairs are covered as part of employment benefits." They talked for another 20 minutes about meal planning, dietary restrictions among the crew, grocery shopping arrangements, and salary details. The pay was better than what she made at the diner, and, with housing provided, she would be able to save money for the first time in years. "Miss Santos, I'd like to invite you and your children to visit the ranch this weekend, if you're available. You could see the facilities, meet some of the crew, and get a feel for whether this would be a good fit for your family. Maria's pulse quickened. This Saturday, if that works for you. It's about an hour drive from Millbrook. I can email you directions. Yes, that would be perfect. After they hung up, Maria sat in her kitchen staring at her phone. A ranch visit. This was really happening. Emma appeared beside her chair, having abandoned her coloring book. Mama, you look funny. Are you scared? A little scared, but also excited, Maria admitted. Mr. Morrison invited us to visit the ranch this Saturday. Really? Can we see the horses? I'm sure we can. Carlos looked up from his book. Is this really happening? Are we really going to move to a ranch? Maybe, baby. We need to visit first and make sure it's right for us. That night, after the children were asleep, Maria researched everything she could find about Broken Arrow Ranch. The property covered several thousand acres in the hill country north of Millbrook. The website showed pictures of cattle grazing in green pastures, a large barn complex, and several outbuildings. The main house looked substantial but not ostentatious, built in a traditional ranch style with a wide front porch. She also researched ranch cooking in more detail, finding websites and forums where ranch cooks shared recipes and tips. The food seemed to emphasize protein, carbohydrates, and generous portions. Breakfast might include eggs, bacon or sausage, pancakes or biscuits, hash browns, and coffee. Lunch could be sandwiches, chili, soup, or leftovers from dinner. Dinner typically featured beef as the main course, along with vegetables, bread, and dessert. The more she read, the more confident she felt. This was really just cooking for hungry people, something she had been doing for years. The scale would be larger, but the principles were the same. On Thursday, she gave Mr. Henderson notice that Saturday would be her last day. He seemed genuinely sorry to see her go, but also relieved that he wouldn't have to officially fire her. Where are you headed? He asked as she finished her final lunch shift. A ranch cook position, 40 miles north. Mr. Henderson whistled low. That's a big change from waiting tables in town. Sometimes big changes are exactly what you need. Friday evening, Maria spent 2 hours helping Emma and Carlos pack a small overnight bag, just in case the ranch visit led to an immediate job offer. She wasn't sure how these things worked, but she wanted to be prepared for any possibility. What should I wear to meet cowboys? Emma asked, holding up a dress with ruffles. Something comfortable that you can walk around in, Maria suggested. We'll probably be outside looking at animals and buildings. Carlos was more practical, packing extra socks and his favorite book. Will there be other kids there? Jake mentioned that his daughter spends summers at the ranch, but I don't know if she'll be there this weekend. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. Maria dressed carefully in jeans and a nice blouse, wanting to look professional but not out of place on a working ranch. She had braided her long dark hair into a practical style and chosen comfortable walking shoes. The drive to Broken Arrow Ranch took them through increasingly rural countryside. They passed other ranches, their entrance gates marked with metal signs bearing family names and cattle brands. Emma pressed her face to the window, exclaiming over every horse and cow they spotted. The entrance to Broken Arrow Ranch was marked by a substantial wooden gate with the name burned into a crossbeam. A dirt road wound through pastures where black cattle grazed peacefully. In the distance, Maria could see a cluster of buildings including a large barn, several smaller structures, and a 2-story house with a wraparound porch. They parked in front of the main house, and Maria took a deep breath. This was it. Either this would work out or it wouldn't, but at least they would know. A man emerged from the house as they got out of the car. He was tall and lean, with graying hair beneath a well-worn cowboy hat. His face was weathered from years of outdoor work, but his smile was warm and genuine. Miss Santos, I'm Jake Morrison. Welcome to Broken Arrow Ranch. Please, call me Maria. These are my children, Emma and Carlos. Jake crouched down to Emma's eye level. Hello there. Are you excited to see some horses? Emma nodded vigorously, suddenly, shy in the presence of a real cowboy. And Carlos, Jake continued, straightening up to shake the boy's hand. I hear you're interested in space travel. We've got some pretty good stargazing out here, away from all the city lights. Carlos smiled, clearly pleased that Jake remembered details from their conversation. Let me show you around, Jake said. We'll start with the main house and kitchen facilities. Then, take a look at the employee housing. They walked up the porch steps into a spacious entry hall. The house was larger than it had looked from outside, with high ceilings and wide windows that let in plenty of natural light. The floors were polished hardwood, and the furniture looked comfortable and well-used rather than fancy. The ranch has been in my family for 3 generations, Jake explained as they walked through a large living room. My grandfather built the original house in the 1940s. My father expanded it in the 1970s when the operation grew. I took over 5 years ago when Dad decided to retire to Florida. The kitchen was impressive, clearly designed for serious cooking. It featured commercial-grade appliances, including a 6-burner gas range with 2 ovens, a large refrigerator and separate freezer, and plenty of counter space for meal preparation. A walk-in pantry was stocked with bulk supplies. We typically serve breakfast in the dining room adjacent to the kitchen, Jake explained, opening a door to reveal a long table that could seat 12 people. Lunch and dinner are usually served here too, though during busy seasons, some of the crew might take their meals in the bunkhouse. Maria ran her hand along the granite countertop, imagining herself working in this space. It was better equipped than any restaurant kitchen she had ever seen. The crew varies depending on the season, Jake continued. Right now we have 8 full-time employees, plus myself. During calving season and roundup, we might have 12 or 15 people on the property. They spent 20 minutes in the kitchen while Jake explained the meal schedules, dietary preferences of various crew members, and the grocery shopping arrangements. A supply truck came out from town twice a week, but Maria would be responsible for planning menus and maintaining inventory. Now let's go see the house where you'd be living, Jake said, leading them back outside. They walked across a gravel road toward a smaller house nestled among oak trees. It was a single-story ranch-style home with a red tile roof and a covered front porch. The yard was large and fenced, with mature shade trees and what looked like the remains of a vegetable garden. This was built for the previous foreman and his family, Jake explained as he unlocked the front door. They moved to New Mexico last year, so it's been empty except for occasional use by visiting family members. The house was perfect. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an open living area, and a kitchen equipped for a family rather than commercial cooking. The rooms were spacious and filled with natural light. Emma immediately claimed the bedroom with windows facing the pasture, while Carlos was drawn to the room with built-in bookshelves. The previous tenants left some furniture, Jake said, gesturing to a couch and dining table. You're welcome to use what's here or bring your own things. Maria walked through the rooms, trying to imagine their furniture arranged in these spaces. It would be like living in a palace compared to their cramped apartment. There's no rent or utilities, Jake continued. Those are covered as part of the employment package. The house has satellite internet, and we get decent cell phone reception most of the time. They spent an hour exploring the property. Emma was delighted by the horses in the corral and begged to pet them. Jake obliged, introducing her to a gentle mare named Buttercup who nuzzled Emma's hands looking for treats. Carlos was fascinated by the barn complex and the various pieces of ranch equipment. We run about 500 head of cattle, Jake explained as they stood at a fence overlooking a pasture where black cows grazed with their calves. It's a year-round operation, but the busiest times are spring calving and fall roundup. Maria found herself relaxing as the tour continued. The ranch felt peaceful and well-organized. The crew members they met were polite and friendly. Everyone seemed to know their role and take pride in their work. During lunch, which Jake had prepared himself, they sat at the big dining table in the main house. He had made sandwiches, soup, and coffee, simple food but well-prepared and generously portioned. The crew usually expects hot meals, Jake said apologetically. I'm not much of a cook beyond basic survival food. The sandwich was actually quite good, with thick slices of roast beef and fresh vegetables on homemade bread. Maria complimented him on the bread. I didn't make that, Jake admitted with a laugh. Mrs. Hoffman in town bakes for us twice a week. That would be part of your supply arrangement. After lunch, they sat on the front porch while Emma and Carlos explored the yard under Jake's watchful supervision. The afternoon was warm but not hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of grass and wildflowers. What questions do you have for me? Jake asked, settling into a rocking chair. Maria had been thinking about this throughout the tour. The job seems wonderful, but I want to be honest about my concerns. I've never cooked for this many people on a daily basis. I've never lived in such a rural area. My children have never been around large animals. Are you sure we're what you're looking for? Jake considered her words carefully. Miss Santos, I've hired a lot of people over the years. Some had all the right experience on paper, but couldn't handle the isolation or the pace of ranch life. Others had no ranch background at all, but thrived because they had the right attitude. He gestured toward Emma, who was sitting in the grass picking flowers, and Carlos, who was reading his book in the shade of an oak tree. Your children are polite and well-behaved. You ask thoughtful questions and listen carefully to the answers. You're honest about your limitations instead of trying to oversell yourself. Those qualities matter more than whether you've cooked for cowboys before. Maria felt a warmth spread through her chest. So you think we might work out? I think you might be exactly what we need, Jake said. But the decision has to feel right to you and your family. This is a big change. They talked for another hour about practical details. When would she need to start? How much notice should she give her current employer? What about school enrollment for the children? The local school district is small but good, Jake said. Emma would be in 3rd grade, Carlos in 5th. They'd probably be the only new students this year, so they'd get plenty of attention from teachers. As the afternoon wore on, Maria found herself feeling increasingly comfortable with the idea of moving to the ranch. The work seemed manageable, the living situation was better than anything she could afford on her own, and Jake seemed like a fair and considerate employer. But it was a huge decision. Was she being impulsive? Was she dragging her children into an uncertain situation because she was desperate to escape their current problems? Can I have a day or two to think it over? She asked finally. Of course. This is a big decision for your family. Take all the time you need. As they prepared to leave, Jake walked them back to their car. Emma was clutching a handful of wildflowers, and Carlos had a small rock that Jake had told him contained fossil imprints. Thank you for showing us around, Maria said. It's a beautiful place. Thank you for coming out. I hope we'll be hearing from you soon. During the drive home, Emma chattered excitedly about the horses and asked if she could learn to ride. Carlos was quieter, but seemed thoughtful rather than worried. What did you think? Maria asked him as they turned onto the highway toward Millbrook. It seems nice, he said carefully. Really different from here, but nice. The stars would be amazing without all the streetlights. And you, Emma? What did you think? I want to live with the horses, Emma declared. And Jake said maybe I could have a kitten if we moved there. That night, after the children were asleep, Maria sat at her kitchen table with a legal pad, making lists. Pros and cons of taking the ranch job. Things they would need to do if they decided to move. Questions she still wanted to ask Jake. The pro list was longer. Better pay, free housing, a peaceful environment for the children, job security, the opportunity to use her cooking skills in a new way, and a fresh start away from the reminders of their struggles in Millbrook. The con list was shorter but significant. Moving away from Mrs. Peterson and the few other people they knew. Starting over in a new community. The risk that ranch life might not suit them. The possibility that she might not be able to handle the cooking responsibilities. But as she sat there in her tiny kitchen, listening to the sounds of traffic and sirens from the street outside, Maria realized that the biggest risk might be staying where they were. In Millbrook, she would always be the single mother who couldn't quite make ends meet, always struggling to find adequate work, always worried about the next financial crisis. At Broken Arrow Ranch, she could be someone new, someone who cooked satisfying meals for hardworking people, someone who lived in a house with a yard and raised her children in a place where they could run and play safely. Maria picked up her phone and composed a text message to Jake Morrison. Thank you for the wonderful tour today. After discussing it with my children, we would like to accept the position. When would you like us to start? She hit send before she could change her mind. Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished cleaning the last table at the diner. The lunch rush had been brutal, and her feet ached from standing for 6 straight hours. She glanced at the clock above the kitchen door. 2:30 in the afternoon. Her shift would end at 3, giving her just enough time to pick up her children from the neighbor's house before they got restless. The diner's owner, Mr. Henderson, emerged from his office with a stack of papers. His face wore the same tired expression it had carried for months. Business had been slow, and everyone knew it. Maria had been working at Henderson's diner for 3 years, ever since her husband left. The pay was barely enough to cover rent, groceries, and childcare, but it was steady work in a town where steady work was hard to find. "Maria, can I speak with you for a minute?" Mr. Henderson's voice carried a weight that made her stomach clench. She untied her apron and followed him to a corner booth. The vinyl seats were cracked and patched with duct tape, much like everything else in the establishment. Mr. Henderson sat down heavily, his gray hair disheveled from running his hands through it. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this," he began, avoiding her eyes. "I'm going to have to let you go. Business has been down 30% this quarter, and I can't afford to keep the full staff anymore." Maria felt the world tilt slightly. She had seen this coming but had hoped it would pass her by. When, end of the week, "I'm sorry, Maria. You're a good worker, but I just don't have the money coming in." She nodded numbly, her mind already racing through the math. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Her daughter Emma needed new school shoes. Her son Carlos had a doctor's appointment next month that would cost $200 even with their basic insurance. "I understand," she managed to say, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Mr. Henderson reached across the table and patted her hand awkwardly. "I'll give you a good reference. You're reliable and hardworking. Someone will snap you up." Maria wanted to laugh at his optimism, but didn't have the energy. In their small town of Millbrook, there weren't many employers looking for a 34-year-old single mother with only a high school education and restaurant experience. She finished her shift in a daze, going through the motions of wiping down surfaces and restocking napkin dispensers. The other waitress, Jenny, gave her sympathetic looks but didn't say much. Everyone was walking on eggshells, wondering who would be next. At 3 o'clock sharp, Maria clocked out and walked to her beat-up Honda Civic. The car had been her husband's before he decided that responsibility wasn't for him. Now it was hers, along with the monthly payments and the strange rattling noise it made when she turned left. The drive to Mrs. Peterson's house took 10 minutes through the quiet residential streets. Millbrook had once been a thriving agricultural community, but most of the big farms had been sold off to developers or abandoned altogether. Now it was the kind of place where people either stayed their whole lives or left as soon as they graduated high school. Mrs. Peterson was a godsend, an elderly widow who watched Emma and Carlos after school for a fraction of what the official daycare centers charged. She lived in a tidy house with a garden that always seemed to be blooming with something colorful. Mama, Emma, age 8, rushed out of the house with a drawing clutched in her small fist. Her dark hair bounced in pigtails, and her school uniform was only slightly wrinkled from a day of learning and playing. Carlos, 10 years old and already showing signs of inheriting his father's height, followed more slowly. He carried his backpack with the careful precision of a child who had learned to be responsible early. "How was school?" Maria asked, accepting Emma's enthusiastic hug. "Mrs. Rodriguez said my story about the princess was the best in the class," Emma announced proudly. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Carlos hung back slightly, studying his mother's face with the perceptive eyes of a child who had learned to read adult moods. "Are you okay, Mom?" Maria forced a smile. "I'm fine, baby. Just tired from work." Mrs. Peterson appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was a small woman with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "How was your day, dear?" "Could be better," Maria admitted. Mrs. Peterson had a way of making people want to tell the truth. "Well, come in for a minute. I just made coffee, and the children were helping me look at something on the computer." Maria followed Mrs. Peterson into the cozy living room while Emma and Carlos settled at the kitchen table with glasses of milk and homemade cookies. The house smelled like vanilla and old books, a combination that always made Maria feel slightly less overwhelmed. Mrs. Peterson poured coffee into mismatched mugs and handed one to Maria. "I was showing the children how to look for things on the internet. Emma wanted to find pictures of horses, and Carlos was curious about space shuttles." "That's very kind of you," Maria said, sipping the coffee. It was strong and exactly what she needed. "Actually, while we were looking, I came across something that might interest you. Mrs. Peterson moved to her computer desk and gestured for Maria to join her. The computer was old but functional, a gift from Mrs. Peterson's nephew who lived in the city. I remembered you mentioning once that you enjoyed cooking, not just the simple stuff you do at the diner, but real cooking. You said you used to help your grandmother make traditional Mexican dishes. Maria nodded. Her grandmother had been an amazing cook, able to create elaborate meals from simple ingredients. Some of Maria's happiest childhood memories involved standing on a step stool in her grandmother's kitchen, learning to make tamales and pozole. Mrs. Peterson clicked on a web page. There's a job posting here that went up at noon today. A ranch about 40 miles north of here is looking for a cook. Maria leaned closer to read the screen. The posting was simple and straightforward. Seeking experienced cook for working cattle ranch. Must be able to prepare meals for 6 to 12 people daily. Housing provided on ranch property. Competitive salary. Ranch experience preferred, but not required. Family-friendly environment. Contact Jake Morrison at Broken Arrow Ranch. 40 miles away, Maria murmured. That's too far to commute. But it says housing provided, Mrs. Peterson pointed out gently. And family-friendly environment. Maria felt a flutter of something that might have been hope, but she pushed it down. I don't know anything about ranch cooking. What if they want someone who can make huge quantities of food? What if they need someone who knows about cooking for cowboys or outdoor workers? What if they just need someone who cares about making good food? Mrs. Peterson countered. You've been cooking for people at the diner for 3 years. You know how to manage a kitchen, how to keep track of supplies, how to feed people who work hard and come to the table hungry. Emma appeared at Maria's elbow, having finished her cookies. What's a ranch, Mama? It's a big place where they raise cattle and horses, Maria explained absently, still staring at the job posting. Like cowboys. Emma's eyes went wide with excitement. Something like that. Carlos joined them, always curious when computers were involved. Are we moving to a ranch? No, baby. I'm just looking at job listings. But, even as she said it, Maria found herself rereading the posting. Housing provided. That would eliminate her biggest expense. Family-friendly environment. That suggested they wouldn't mind her having children. You know, Mrs. Peterson said quietly. Sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as the scariest decisions. Maria thought about Mr. Henderson's tired face and the dwindling tips and the constant worry about making ends meet. She thought about Emma's outgrown shoes and Carlos's upcoming doctor visit and the Honda's increasingly ominous mechanical sounds. Can you help me send an email? She asked Mrs. Peterson. Mrs. Peterson smiled and pulled up a new message window. What do you want to say? Maria composed her thoughts carefully. She needed to sound professional, but not pretentious, confident, but not arrogant. Dear Mr. Morrison, she began. I saw your posting for a ranch cook position. I have 3 years of experience in restaurant food service and have been cooking since I was a child. I am a single mother of 2 well-behaved children, ages 8 and 10. We are looking for a fresh start and a stable home environment. She paused, wondering if mentioning her children right away was a mistake. But if they weren't welcome, better to know now than waste everyone's time. I am hardworking, reliable, and passionate about creating nutritious, satisfying meals. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss how my skills might benefit your operation. I can be reached at this email address or by phone at 555-0147. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Maria Santos. Mrs. Peterson typed as Maria spoke, occasionally suggesting small changes to make the email flow better. When it was finished, they read it over twice. Are you sure about this? Mrs. Peterson asked, her finger hovering over the send button. Maria looked at her children, who were watching the proceedings with interest. Emma was still clutching her drawing of a princess, and Carlos had pulled out a library book about space exploration. They were good kids who deserved better than watching their mother struggle to pay bills every month. Send it, she said. The email disappeared into cyberspace with a soft whoosh. Maria felt a mixture of relief and terror wash over her. She had taken the first step toward something completely unknown. Now we wait, Mrs. Peterson said, logging out of her email. Now we wait, Maria agreed, though she knew she would probably check her email every hour until she heard something back. They gathered up Emma and Carlos and their school things, said goodbye to Mrs. Peterson, and headed home. The apartment complex where they lived was not quite run down, but definitely showing its age. The parking lot had potholes, and the building's beige paint was faded and peeling in places. Their unit was on the second floor, a two-bedroom place with thin walls, and a kitchen barely large enough for two people. Maria started dinner while the children did homework at the small table that served as both dining area and homework station. She made chicken quesadillas and Spanish rice, simple food that stretched their grocery budget while still tasting good. As she cooked, her mind wandered to the ranch job. What would it be like to cook for cowboys? Would they expect elaborate meals or simple, hearty food? "Mom, you're burning the onions," Carlos observed without looking up from his math worksheet. Maria startled back to attention and quickly lowered the heat. "Thanks, baby." During dinner, she found herself studying her children's faces. Emma chattered about her day with the endless enthusiasm of an 8-year-old, while Carlos ate steadily and interjected occasional comments. They were adaptable kids who had learned to roll with the punches life threw at them. But was it fair to uproot them for a job that might not even work out? After dinner, while the children watched television, Maria sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, an ancient machine that took forever to boot up, but still connected to the internet. She researched Broken Arrow Ranch, finding a basic website with photos of rolling hills, cattle grazing in green pastures, and a rustic main house. The property looked peaceful and well-maintained. The About Us section mentioned that the ranch had been in the Morrison family for 3 generations and specialized in raising grass-fed beef cattle. She also researched ranch cooking, discovering that it was indeed different from restaurant work. Ranch cooks typically prepared 3 substantial meals a day for hungry outdoor workers. Breakfast might be eggs, bacon, pancakes, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Lunch could be sandwiches, soup, and hearty sides. Dinner usually featured meat as the centerpiece, accompanied by vegetables, bread, and dessert. The more she read, the more intimidated she felt. These people would expect someone who could handle feeding a crew of ranch hands, not someone whose most challenging culinary experience had been managing the breakfast rush at a small-town diner. But then, she remembered her grandmother's voice, speaking in rapid Spanish as she guided young Maria through the steps of making carnitas. "Cooking is about love," her grandmother had said. "If you cook with love, people can taste it. They will always come back to your table." Maybe ranch cooking wasn't so different from any other kind of cooking. Maybe it was just about understanding what people needed and providing it consistently and with care. Emma appeared at her elbow in pajamas decorated with unicorns. "Mama, will you read to me?" Maria closed the laptop and smiled at her daughter. "Of course, Mija. What book tonight?" They settled into Emma's narrow bed with a well-worn copy of Charlotte's Web. As Maria read about Wilbur the pig and his friend Charlotte the spider, she thought about fresh starts and taking chances. In the story, Wilbur was saved by an unlikely friendship and a lot of determination. Maybe real life could work that way too. Carlos appeared in the doorway during the chapter about the county fair. "Can I listen too?" "Come on." Maria patted the bed, making room for both children. They finished 2 chapters before Emma's eyelids started drooping. Maria tucked her in and moved to Carlos's room for his bedtime routine. He was getting older and didn't need as much hands-on attention, but he still liked her to sit with him for a few minutes before sleep. "Mom," he said as she turned off his light, "are we really going to move to a ranch?" "I don't know yet, baby. I just applied for a job. They might not even want to hire me. But if they do?" Maria considered her answer carefully. Carlos was old enough to understand that their life wasn't easy, though she tried to shield both children from the worst of her financial stress. If they do, it would mean changes. A new place to live, new schools for you and Emma. But it might also mean good changes. A stable job, a nice place to live. Carlos was quiet for a moment. Would there really be horses? Probably. Most ranches have horses. That would be cool. After saying goodnight to Carlos, Maria returned to the kitchen table and opened her laptop again. She had one new email, and her heart jumped before she realized it was just a newsletter from the grocery store advertising weekly specials. She checked the clock. Only 2 hours had passed since she sent her application. It was unrealistic to expect a response so quickly, but that didn't stop her from feeling disappointed. The evening stretched ahead of her with all the usual tasks. She needed to review the bills that were due next week, plan meals for the rest of the week with what was left in their grocery budget, and try to figure out how to stretch their savings to cover the gap between losing her job at the diner and finding new employment. But for the first time in months, she also had something to hope for. Maybe the ranch job would work out. Maybe it would be exactly what they needed. Maybe taking a chance on something completely different would turn out to be the best decision she had ever made. Or maybe she would never hear back from Jake Morrison, and she would spend the next few weeks frantically applying for every available position in Millbrook, most of which would pay less than the diner job she was about to lose. Maria closed the laptop and decided not to check her email again until morning. Whatever was going to happen would happen, and worrying about it tonight would not change the outcome. She spent an hour cleaning the apartment, a ritual that always helped her think more clearly. As she wiped down surfaces and organized clutter, her mind wandered through possibilities and scenarios. What kind of person was Jake Morrison? What would it be like to live on a working ranch? Would Emma and Carlos adapt well to such a dramatic change? By the time she finally went to bed, Maria had convinced herself that applying for the ranch job had been an impulsive mistake. She was a diner waitress from a small town, not someone qualified to feed ranch hands and cowboys. She would probably never hear back from them, and that was probably for the best. But as she drifted off to sleep, she found herself dreaming about wide open spaces and the smell of coffee brewing before dawn, about feeding people who worked with their hands and came to the table grateful for a good meal. In her dream, Emma was riding a gentle horse while Carlos helped with some kind of ranch work, both children tanned and happy and more confident than she had ever seen them. When her alarm clock went off at 6 the next morning, Maria's first thought was to check her email. But she forced herself to go through her normal routine first. Shower, dress, wake the children, make breakfast, pack lunches, drive to Mrs. Peterson's house, exchange pleasantries about the weather and the children's plans for the day. Only after she had settled into another day at the diner did she allow herself to pull out her phone and check her messages. There was one new email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read, Cook position at Broken Arrow Ranch. Maria's hands shook slightly as she opened the message.